What's up, guys and geeks? Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1 has finally dropped with our first new episode of The Mandalorian in 2 years. But was this first episode fun or was it a flop? Today we find out. Alright, before I get started, be sure to join me in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 3. My opinion's not the right opinion, of course, just my opinion. And also, the way this video is going to work is first I'm going to give my overall spoiler-free review of the episode, and then near the end I'll let you know before I get into the spoiler breakdown of the episode. So if you haven't seen it, you'll probably want to stop there. Alright, let's get started with my overall thoughts. First, the good things about this first episode. It's great, of course, to see the Mandalorian and Grogu back at it again. I love the camaraderie, the way that in this season especially, they're kind of showing how the Mandalorian is taking really more of a fatherly role towards Grogu. In season 1, Grogu was a bit more of a plot device. In season 2, it was a bit more about their journey trying to bring him to the Jedi. But in this season, Mando's really accepted his role as Grogu's father, and he acts accordingly. We get to see a lot more of him interacting with Grogu in an educational standpoint, teaching him about what it means to be a Mandalorian, teaching him about navigation. We just get to see all these little moments of Mando and Grogu interacting and forming that father-son relationship that we've been wanting to see. Of course, as always, the action is incredible.
Well, duh.
This first episode has a few action scenes that are pretty entertaining. Not the greatest action scenes of the whole series, but for an episode like this, they're very good, very consistent, very well shot action. I liked the way that we get to understand more of Mando's like desire and really how much importance he puts in this creed. Throughout the entire series, we've just seen how Mando really buys full stock into the Mandalorian creed.
It's the way.
And the way and the path and all of that. And just this season continues that story as he tries to prove himself worthy to be a Mandalorian again after the events in Mando Season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett.
And you are a Mandalorian no more.
But now moving on to some of the mixed parts of the episode. I thought the pacing could tend to be a little slow, as can happen with episodes of The Mandalorian. With that interaction between Mando and Grogu, with some of that more fatherly behavior on behalf of the Mandalorian, it does tend to we have some slower scenes, and those scenes do kind of provide a bit of a tonal contrast to the usual action-packed episodes we're used to from the Mandalorian. It's not a bad thing, it's just interesting to see how the tone really shifts, and it's not always the best integration. It doesn't always provide the best mix of tones and pacing. Really, honestly, this episode was overall a positive. If I had to say something bad about it, I'd say that it probably felt more like a setup episode. Traditionally, Mandalorian episodes are very episodic. You can watch one episode and not necessarily have to watch all the others. For instance, when I started watching Mandalorian, I watched season 1, episode 6 before I started the series, and I was able to understand everything within that episode. But this season, it looks like they're taking it on a lot more of the traditional storyline journey. And so this episode is very much the beginning, the setup. We introduce a bunch of plot points, we introduce a bunch of characters and motivations, and it's interesting. It feels a lot slower paced and a lot like less like a self-contained story than a traditional season opener for a Mandalorian episode. But overall, this episode was very good. I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10. So obviously, very, very good episode. Quality Mandalorian content as we all would expect. And this is the point where now I'm going to give you your spoiler warning. I'm transitioning into my breakdown of the episode. So if you haven't seen the episode, go watch it and then come back.
Spoiler alert.
All right, so Mando season 3 episode 1 starts off with a Mandalorian child. I think he's a foundling. I'm not sure, but it's just a Mandalorian child, and there's all these Mandalorians in armor carrying banners around him. They're on this sandy beach, and the armor is there, and this young Mandalorian is putting on his helmet and taking the creed to become a full-fledged member of Mando's clan. And before he can finish that creed, a giant, I don't know, I guess a giant aquatic snake type creature bursts out of the water on the beach and attacks the Mandalorian ceremony. And Mando, he flies in his new ship and helps take down this monster. But really, and I'll talk about what I mean more in my episode 2 review. But throughout these episodes, these first 2 episodes, we see a recurring theme of Mandalorian ceremonies and Mandalorian traditions being interrupted in modern times and not being carried out the way they're intended to be. So it's interesting to see that we're kind of left wondering if the Mandalorian tradition as Mando accepts it, whether that can continue on or if he needs to adapt to the times, if he needs to kind of change what he's doing. But anyway, after that episode, we do get to see Mando and Grogu. And Mando, after he helps save the Mandalorians, he talks to the armor, and she re-emphasizes that he can only be cleansed, he can only be reaccepted into the clan if he bathes in the living waters of Mandalore.
Have you ever removed your helmet?
And as fans of Star Wars as a whole know, Mandalore has been bombed and devastated and really depleted of all resources by the Empire when they came to mine Beskar and bombed the planet's surface. So this episode we see Mandalorian. He goes to Navarro and meets Grief Karga again, or High Magistrate Karga as he insists on being called. And Navarro has overall become this much more prosperous place. It's become a great mining empire and a trade empire, and Karga wants to kind of transform it into a truly independent trade empire of the galaxy. And so Mando, the reason Mando goes to Navarro is because he wants IG-11. IG-11, of course, was destroyed near the end of the first season.
I need to remove your helmet if I am to save you.
And Mando says he needs a droid he can trust to test the air on Mandalore to see if it's safe for him to go and bathe in the living waters. And this plot point in and of itself, I think it's a good setup in this episode, but as I'll talk about more in my episode 2 review, I don't really love the way they kind of conclude this plot point. But anyway, IG-11, they take his parts, which have been set up on a pedestal in honor of his sacrifice in season 1. They bring him to some aliens, and Mando is told that they don't have the necessary parts to repair IG-11. So he decides to go off and find those parts. And there's a scene where we see Grief Karga offer Mando an opportunity to stay on Navarro and become prosperous and become a miner and kind of serve as the town's sheriff. But Mando, of course, declines because he wants to get back to his people. He wants to bathe and return to being a full-fledged Mandalorian.
It's the way.
And also, while he's on Navarro, he intervenes. Grief Karga is having a bit of a confrontation with some pirates, and Mando steps in and winds up shooting down several pirates.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So that sets up later in the episode this conflict where the pirate captain is coming after him and Grogu. And it looks like that's going to be a continuing plot point throughout the season. These pirates trying to hunt down Mando and make him pay for killing some of those men. So Mando, he escapes from the pirates barely by jumping into hyperspace. And then he flies off and he lands on the planet Kalevala. Probably butchering that pronunciation, but he lands on this planet and he meets Bo-Katan Kryze. And last season, at the end of season 2, we left them with a bit of tension because, of course, Bo-Katan wanted the dark saber, but Mando had won it in combat from Moff Gideon, and so Bo-Katan wasn't able to take the dark saber because she hadn't won it in combat.
It must be won in battle.
And so Mando comes to Bo-Katan and she's devastated. All her people are gone, all her ships are gone because she didn't have the darksaber. Her people were spread out across the galaxy, and she kind of in a way blames Mando for it. But he comes to her.
This is your fault.
Don't.
Mando comes, meets Bo-Katan, and they have a tense, very tense discussion that's building up the tension for that episode. And the episode essentially ends there with the promise of Mando going off to Mandalore to try to bathe in the living waters and rejoin the Mandalorian cult. So overall, very good episode of television overall. But as far as an episode of The Mandalorian, I feel like this one was held back a bit simply by the amount of plot points they were trying to set up, the amount of story they were trying to set up, the amount of setup they were trying to do for the rest of the season.
It's too much. It's too much.
Ultimately, this episode really feels like it's more of an overall part of an overall season, more so than the episodic episodes we are accustomed to from the previous 2 seasons. So it's a great episode, some great plot points, great characters. Love that Mando's trying to rebuild IG-11. Love getting to go back to Navarro. I'm very interested to see where they take this conflict with the pirates in future episodes. Interested to see how they carry on the story of Mando's tension with Bo-Katan and her kind of fall from glory after season 2. And how they develop that later on. Love the father-son bond we're getting to see between Mando and Grogu. So overall, I love this episode. Alright, be sure to let me know what you thought of Mando Season 3 Episode 1 in the comments down below. Sorry this video is a little late. I'll try to get out my Episode 2 review and reaction as soon as possible. If you want to go ahead and see my thoughts with my brother on the new Ninja Turtles trailer, you can click on the right side of the screen. And if you want to go ahead and see why Harry Potter couldn't see the Thestrals until later on, you can click on the other side of the screen. But until then, keep watching Mandalorian content, and I'll see you later.